Welcome to the podcast, Daniel. How are you today?
I'm doing just fine, Ed. How you doing?
I am doing well. Is the weather good out sunny California?
Believe it or not, being that it's autumn here and we're at the beach, it's a little overcast, but that's not unusual. But otherwise, very mild temperature. It's a beautiful time of year.
Excellent, excellent. Well, you've developed a 5-phase succession planning system that you've now implemented in over 100 firms, as I mentioned during the introduction. Could you walk us through why most law firms struggle with succession planning and how your system addresses these challenges?
Absolutely, would love to. First of all, we all know we're going to leave our firms either horizontally or vertically. Generally, it's our choice. So if we choose to leave vertically, leave when we want to, then we should have some process, some program to create the future that we want for the organization as well as for ourselves, regardless of the size of law firm, whether you're a one-person firm with support or whether you're an international firm. The reason this became very personal for me, and I think you've heard this before, is my paternal grandfather was a great attorney. General practice, but with a focus and emphasis on estate planning. Except when he passed away after his fifth bypass in his late 80s, he did not have a plan. He did not have a trust. He did not have a will. And not only did that shock me, even at my then relatively young age, but it created some real issues for the family. So this became very personal for me. So we looked at this, and in the work that I've done with law firms and other organizations across the country, I wanted to create something that was easy to follow, systematic, efficient in getting the job done, and effective. So that's why I really created it. But what we also found is for every firm that we have worked with, when they measure their value before the succession plan and afterwards, it creates more value. And you know this from your practice.
Right. I'm always shocked about those who don't do any succession planning because I often see the results of it. You know, I get calls from widows and widowers, and they're trying to figure out what to do with this firm that ultimately becomes a liability for them. And that's truly unfortunate. So interesting. So that's great. It came out of your life experiences. So let's do a little bit of a deep dive into that 5-phase program. Now, one thing I really like is in this section of your book, you got this great quote from Eisenhower that our plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And I love that quote because I use a similar one. I love to prepare models, but I recognize, and this is a quote from an economist, that all models are wrong. Some are useful. Right. And so at the end of the day, it gives us a guidance where we're going to go, but the path we cannot predict. Right. That's ultimately it. So tell me about the philosophy for succession planning and really where this starts.
Well, for those of us old enough to remember the original Saturday Night Live, there was a character, Rosanna Dana, whose closing line on each skit was, "It's always something." The reality is things happen. I mean, there's that old expression that, people plan and God laughs. There's always going to be some surprises. So what we try to do is, and I tried to do this as I built and implemented the model in all these different firms, create something that took the theory and the practice and blended it and gave us a tool that we could plan for the worst, expect the best, and hopefully land somewhere in the middle. And the reality is, Ed, those of us who work in this world, you and I and others, recognize that either a law firm can create their succession plan, in other words, control their future to some degree through a plan and implementation, or the world will do it for them. So my question to most law firm leaders is, do you want to control your future or do you want your competitors to?
Right. Interesting. So let's start with the preparation phase. So What does that look like? What are the most common mistakes that firms make in that phase?
Well, in the very first phase, we try to challenge the leaders of the firm. What is your purpose? Is your purpose for a short-term exit? Is that why you're creating your succession plan? Is your purpose to bring in the next generation of family? And I've got one firm that the founder of the firm is already preparing his grandson to come into the practice. That's part of his succession plan. So what is the real purpose? We lay out a roadmap. There is a checklist in there. There's an org chart. What does your current organization chart look like? What is the future going to look like at the point, let's say, that you may want to exit? So we've got a future reality and a current reality, and then we can get from one to the other. Some of the biggest challenges I find in this regard is when founders or managing partners aren't quite sure on their purpose. Why am I doing this? And if they're not clear on the purpose, we need to have that conversation, because you never want to get in the car and say, okay, I'm going on vacation. Let's see where the car takes me. Even with self-driving vehicles, Ed, you got to have a destination in mind.
Right. No, that's perfect. I like that. It's interesting, that identification phase. And one of the things about your system that I noticed is that there's a ton of worksheets. So you really take this topic that is really intangible. I mean, super intangible. And you're making it into something that is tangible, that people can see, touch, develop, write down. And I think that's fantastic about your system. I really like that a lot. So, all right. So now we come to the identification phase, which I think this makes sense, right? But where are we going is the first. Now, who is going to go there with us, right?
Exactly. And thank you for bringing up the sequence of spreadsheets. The only way that I was able to develop this with the firms I have and install it in them, from my perspective, is to create a sequence of steps, roadmaps, the Excel spreadsheets. We've made it structured that way and yet flexible enough so it will fit with literally any type or size of firm. So one of the most important tools that we have in this is what we call critical roles, where you identify what are the most critical roles in the organization and then assess each of those as to probability of vacancy, what is the impact of vacant, what is your potential internal bench strength, etc. So it's a wake-up call for most firms to look at. All right, if we're going to create a succession plan, who are our potential successors? And then we've got a tool in there we call the success profile, the next step, which is where you identify across 4 different attributes: knowledge, experience, personal attributes, competencies, etc., what your ideal candidate is for each level. So you can compare the people you have inside who have potential to your ideal. That develops a gap analysis, the difference, which then leads to their development plan from your perspective as well as from theirs. So it creates an opportunity for a career ladder, for communication, for evaluation. So those are the primary tools we have in that next step.
Yeah. So I'm interested to, when you've worked with both large organizations and small organizations, right? And so the depth of bench issue is particularly pronounced in those smaller organizations. And so how have you dealt with that depth of bench issue? Well, let me say it the right way: depth of bench issue in your working with smaller organizations.
It is a challenge, but that's why we have cross training. If you're an extremely small firm, let's say you're a single attorney, and you've got then a paralegal, maybe a legal secretary, and maybe a virtual assistant. Not a whole lot of flexibility there, and so you have to look externally, potentially, for your succession. Do you want to effectively parallel another firm? Do you want to grow your firm? I mean, this goes back to the purpose. If you want to be a sole practitioner your entire career, then what value are you going to have for anyone else? what succession is there? And so thinking about that early on becomes very, very important. So we try to always look at how critical a particular role is versus the probability of it being vacant or someone growing. The smaller the firm, as you identified, the more challenging this is. But I'll give you a quick example of the opposite. Sometimes with the very large firms, the challenge is selecting those people who are ready, willing, and able to be involved in a succession plan, even if we're talking about a 5 or 10-year plan. You do have to be selective. One of the tools that we throw in here is a self-selection tool where you look at a candidate. So, Ed, I'm in your firm. You think I might be your successor? Well, you can give me this self-assessment, and I can go through there and really indicate to a pretty deep level what I'm interested in, what I think I have skill sets in, and what I'm not interested in. And that's going to give you some insight as to whether I'm a better candidate than someone else is for potential succession.
And this is where a lot of it breaks down on the smaller firm side, right? Is because if you have identified a successor on the smaller firm side, I find a lot of times, there'll be 5 attorneys plus or minus, right? And they've identified one who kind of is the natural next in line. But then they find out that one really has no interest in being the next in line. And so now there's a scramble to get somebody else set up in that position. And then simultaneously, they're all concerned about that one person staying, right? Because that one person is their knowledge database. And this is something you discuss in the book, is about that loss of knowledge. Why is it so critical for law firms to address that issue, and how do they address it?
Well, the way they should address it is look at what is the knowledge that any individual possesses, and how critical is that to the success of the firm, and what's the probability of losing that individual. But then you have to tie that in once you've assessed that. Okay, how do we transfer the knowledge from individual A, let's say from you, Ed? You're critical to our firm. You're potentially a successor. If we have any inclination that maybe you're not 100% committed or willing or able, how do we transfer your knowledge to others? We should have a tool or some tools to capture, to document your unique knowledge, refer to as corporate knowledge, so that the firm has access to that. So you're not that critical linchpin, because I think you and I both have experienced situations where we know of or have had clients who have had someone pass away. And if they have the secret sauce, that's a problem.
It's a problem. It's huge, huge problem. And the other side of that is really taking a look at it from the standpoint of, it's not a guarantee. Just because somebody says they want to step into that position, it's possible that another better deal comes along, or what they perceive to be a better deal for them, and they move out of that position. So, there's this phrase, one is the loneliest number in business. Honestly, that is really the truth, right? One successor, one revenue source, one marketing channel, all those things have very high risks associated with them. So that also has to be kept in mind. And one mistake that I see occur a lot is where they identify the person, but they don't bring that person into the loop. And then that person says, well, hey, I've been here whatever number of years and they haven't talked to me, so they must not think I'm partner material or whatever. And then they leave, and the owners are like, wait a second, where are you going? We identified you, and unfortunately they didn't tell them soon enough, right?
Critical point. And that goes to communication. The most common complaint I have in organizations I've dealt with throughout the world, literally, is we have poor or no communication. Add to that, Ed, the fact that the most recent Gallup poll said only 31% of employees across business in the U.S. are actively engaged. That means 2/3 of our employees are either passively engaged or actively disengaged, one foot out the door already.
Yeah.
So if you've identified one or more potential successors, it's time to share that conversation. You're not necessarily making a commitment, but at least let them know that you think they have potential, and let's take this the next step.
Yeah, and in the professional service firm context, that next step is often bringing them into some level of ownership, right? Not full ownership, but bringing them in. There are some tax issues and things that come along with that. So let's continue, right? So we talked about identification phase. I think we touched on the analysis phase. Did we get through that?
Yeah, we very definitely touched on it. Then the critiquing phase. That's where you want me to go. Okay, the critiquing phase is where we're really looking at what could get in our way. So we have a tool in here called the derailment. So we look at all of the potential situations, potholes, landmines, whatever we want to call them. We use the term derailment, that could keep the potential successor or successors from being successful. What's going to get in their way? We give them the self-assessment so we know what they perceive. And then we have to do the knowledge management piece is, okay, do we have within the organization all the information, knowledge, tech that we need? And do each of the individuals we've identified as potential successors, do they know how to get where they want to go? So that ties into the development plan. When we looked at assessing them early on, when we looked at the success profile, the gap analysis, what we should have done, and there's a tool, of course, in here to do this, is to create an individual development plan for the individual. So, Ed, you're creating it for me. I know what you expect me to accomplish, what classes I need to take, what competencies I need to master over what period of time, short, medium, and long term, so we can look at this together. It should be a collaborative, and we look at this on a periodic basis like any other evaluation. Is Daniel making the progress I need him to make to step into the role when I'm ready to step away? That's the critique of it.
There are two things that I see often. First off, the owners are hesitant to have that conversation because there is some level of fear over them thinking that the person is going to be scared that the owner is looking to the future and leaving, right? And I always tell people, maybe you agree with this or not. I always tell them, well, they're already thinking that, whether or not you tell them, they're already thinking. The second piece of that is being realistic and making sure that the owners understand that when they come into this role, it will be a new role. There is no way to make them experienced in the role. There's only a way to get them educated for the role, right? I don't know. Have you experienced those, and would you add anything to it?
Well, I would add a quick example. I was working with a local firm, and they had identified 5 potential successors, and they wanted to offer each of them a career path, all 5 of them. Part of what they asked me to do was sit down and interview them and assess their suitability versus their desirability. Did they aspire to the position? And to my great amazement, as well as to the 2 partners who ran the firm, 3 of the 5 said no. They did not want the leadership role. They wanted the paycheck. They didn't want the responsibility. So very quickly, we had to shift and focus on the other 2. But if we had not had that conversation, if the firm had moved forward assuming that those 5 would step in, would buy out the 2 founding partners, it would have been a disaster. Yeah. So having that maybe a little uncomfortable conversation early on is much less painful than later.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, that, it's the hesitation of, oh my God, what happens if, right? Wouldn't you rather know that you've got to make a left turn today than 5 years from now when retirement might be on the horizon for you or something along those lines. So yes, excellent. Okay. So now we go into the critiquing phase. So tell me about that.
Well, that was the critiquing phase.
Okay.
That was the
The
derailment of the
honest
self-assessment
assessment.
phenomenon.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So
And
the
then implement.
implementation phase, I think, is where you were going here.
Yes.
So implementation, this is where the rubber meets the road, as some people say. This is the just do it if you're Nike. So we've gone through all the assessment, all the planning, all the communication, everything that goes into the plan. Now we reach reality. Now you implement the plan. So the implementation phase literally has an implementation chart, a Gantt chart, if you will, that says what must be done, by whom, by when, how do we measure it. We've already looked at potential roadblocks, etc. We have identified all of the documentation we need, not only for the plan, but for the firm. And then we set out metrics so we can measure what is going on in the plan. What needed to be done this week, this month, this quarter, this year? Are we on track? Let's pat ourselves on the back, keep going. What isn't on track, where we need to address that, make an adjustment. And then the final piece of the implementation is, okay, let's sit down at the end of each year, do an evaluation of where we are going compared to where we plan to go. Where do we have to do a reset? And then we continue. So it's an ongoing annual review that holds us accountable. That's the biggest difference between a real succession plan and one that is written and in the drawer. And you and I have both seen that before.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing going on, but it's a plan, but no activity for it, but it's a plan. So good. All right. Well, we've talked about a lot of different charts and spreadsheets and all of that, right? So very much, as I mentioned before, taking something that's intangible and bringing it into visibility. How have you seen that visualization, right? Bringing in the intangible into tangible help out clients, in particular law firms?
In my experience, when you write something down, it becomes real. So many founding partners, managing partners, senior partners know where the organization is going and may even know in their head what their succession plan is. But until it's written down, until the firm can look at it and create consensus, it's not real. So when I've sat down with firms and we've gone through the process, and in some cases it takes a little longer than others, when we get to consensus and write the plan down, suddenly it takes on a sense of reality that never existed before. Consensus is not easy. You know this. Frequently, it leads to conversations, some of which are perfectly fine, some of which might be a little uncomfortable, but it's better to have the uncomfortable conversation early on, as you just mentioned, in case it leads to some issue that needs to be addressed.
Right.
The more time we have, the more ability we have to resolve issues and truly get to consensus so the entire firm knows where we're going.
You can make time your friend or your enemy, right? It's your choice. But
Very
to make
definitely.
it your friend, you better start early. That's for sure.
No question.
So a lot of times, you'll get this down and you get the conversations, at least in the law firm context, where the mid-level partners, they don't necessarily see the value in buying out the older partners, right? And so that is one of the most uncomfortable conversations that I've seen go on, because really the founding partners or the senior partners, most of my guests are baby boomers at this point in time, are talking to the Gen X or, the millennial partners and saying, hey, it's time to buy us out. And that value conversation is really a stumbling point that they see. I'm interested to what kind of, I know we talked a little bit before and we kind of communicated, so I'm going off script here. So I'm putting you on the spot, and I recognize that. That value conversation, how have you helped firms get over those types of difficult conversations?
One of the easiest ways for me, because it pulls me out of the conversation once I initiate it, is to bring someone like you in to develop an independent valuation.
Mhm.
So the baby boomer founder says the firm is worth X. The next generation, the mid-level says, oh, no, that's nowhere close. So you bring in an independent valuation firm that says objectively, this is the value of the firm. That leads to the next conversation of, all right, are you willing, next generation, to find a way to pay that price? Or what's our alternatives? If you want to go worst case scenario, those mid-level managers say, we're not willing to pay that price for this firm. Does that mean we break up the firm? Or does that mean your succession plan now becomes an external sale, which is not necessarily a bad thing either? It may be as good or even a better alternative, but you need to have the conversation. You need to say, I can't value the firm. You internally, second generation, you are looking at this subjectively. You can't argue with your opinion. We can argue facts, not opinion. And
Right.
the founder has their opinion. So you get an independent valuation. Based on that, you have your next conversation. Either we agree or we disagree. If we disagree, then the founder says, okay, let me look at my other alternatives. But again, with enough time to not be forced into a liquidation situation.
Right. So this is really crucial in the law firm context because we can't have non-compete restrictive covenant in a law firm context. So what a lot of times happens is those mid-level partners go off on their own and try and start something different, right? And so having the structure in the partnership agreement that would effectively not allow them to strip out value where they leave the firm a hulk of what it once was with all these bills and expenses is crucially important in that process. The second piece of it, and we keep coming back to it, and that is to do this, you got to have time, right? Because marketing the firm outside takes time. And, and unfortunately, having one buyer is always, always, always going to depress the price. You've got to get more than one buyer if price is an issue. And I've seen firms where the founding partner has been very reasonable in the price, and other times where the founding partner has been completely unreasonable in the price, right? So it varies all over the place. So
sure.
Good. All right. So let's kind of talk about a law firm success story, a firm that's gone through the process and what their outcome looked like. Of course, no names. Feel free to anonymize whatever you need to.
Okay, I'll give you two quick examples. One I think you're familiar with because we talked about it on Tom's podcast. But 50% owner of a firm wanted to retire. The other partner wanted to continue. I helped them, first of all, understand the financials of their practice because had never been their focus. And then we put together a specific plan for this partner's individual succession. We were actually able to help them identify a friendly competitor that came in, and we helped them negotiate the price that they wanted, the terms that they wanted, and they walked away quite happy, getting effectively more or less 100% of what they wanted, part of it up front, part of it on a 5-year payout. And so we were able to do that soup to nuts in 6 months.
Nice. Very nice. So the partner who wanted to continue to practice, did he or she continue to practice with the buyer?
Absolutely. Yes.
Perfect.
It was a little bit of an unusual situation because, again, when you've got two partners that have suddenly two different agendas, something has to happen. And both partners enjoyed working together. Both partners didn't want the partnership to break up. The firm had a strong position in the marketplace, and they both really liked each other. So we were able to find the right buyer to step in here. And again, it helped that they were a known commodity. They were a friendly competitor. And so the whole thing went as smoothly as it might. Now, I'll contrast that with a different success story without a sale.
I'm going to stop you there, right there, Daniel, before we go on to that, because there are really two key factors, two essential factors that I say made that a success. The first one is that they liked each other, because if there's any acrimony, and by the way, that's why you got to do a partnership agreement early on, because things change, right? I mean, somebody gets ill, somebody decides they want to retire, right? Any of those things. But the partnership agreement is when you start and everybody's equal, because you don't know any of the future, right? And so you can put down in writing what you want. So that's crucially important, is to have the partnership agreement in place. The second part of that is that they had a brand, they had a trade name, right? That had value in the marketplace. And so the approach to the competitor was an approach to what I would call a strategic buyer. The competitor could actually make more money off of that brand than the two partners could, because they already had the back end. They already had people to support. So in that, and I don't know the facts of this situation, so I'm just surmising here, but in that transaction, they could essentially carve out the back office operation, move it into their back office operation, and then not have a direct increase in expenses. So that really would have been a win-win all the way around. That was a fantastic deal you put together there. Now let's hear the contrasting one.
Okay. And the contrasting one is not a bad one. It just didn't end up in a sale because that was not the intention. The succession plan for this particular firm was much longer term than most. We typically say 3 to 5 years is the minimum ideal time frame to develop and implement a succession plan. This particular firm, the founding partner always had an exit in mind, but they think they're going to live longer than the average bear. So they're continuing to grow the firm. So part of this was literally, okay, where do you want the firm to be? The reason we name the firm Build It Backwards is we start with the end in mind and we reverse engineer processes. They gave us a date and a size. So we built the succession plan with the idea of growing the firm for the next 10 to 15 years, and that would be the proposed exit. So far in the last 7 years, they've grown the firm by 400%.
Wow. Fantastic.
They are happy.
That's great. That's wonderful. All right. So just a quick idea. What's the timeline? So you said 3 to 5 years. So if I'm coming into this and I'm 10 years away, is it worth it for me to come talk to you?
I would say so. And I'll back up just for a moment. It generally takes just 3 to 6 months to put the plan together. But then you want the 5 to 7 or more years to implement it. And to your question specifically, the reason, even with your 10 years out, or in other cases 15, the earlier you plan, the more control you have. Because just like your personal estate plan, you put your estate plan together and you review it every 5 years. Circumstances change, people change, laws change, rules. If you have 10 years, Ed, before you want to step away from your firm, you put your succession plan together now, you have more time to fix things that aren't working the way you want, or even to make changes, or to say, wow, I was planning to do X in 10 years. I now have my walkaway number in 7 years. My plan is working. Maybe I'll retire a little earlier than I wanted to. More flexibility comes from more time.
Great. Fantastic. Okay. So Daniel, I want to change gears a little bit here, because when you and I had a call recently, we kind of talked about this issue of client mindset and compatibility, right? Because coming through that process really requires a particular client view of the world. So talk to me about what you're looking for in clients and how you evaluate whether prospects have that mindset.
Thank you for asking the question, because it is critical to success. We always want to know, when we start working with a potential client, are you willing to do the work to help you? You're not doing the work to help me. This is for you. I'm just a facilitator. More people are willing to say what they want to do than what they're actually going to do. So in that initial conversation, we try to challenge the individual. Are you willing to do the work for you? If you are, then great. Let's start with some homework and we'll give them an initial assignment. If they do the homework, again, for their personal benefit, as they intend to, and we get back together with them in the time frame that we mutually agreed, then that's the first test. If, on the other hand, they say, yes, I'm ready to do this, yes, I'm willing to do this, yes, and we have these benchmarks, and they don't do the homework, and they have one excuse after the next, or they miss you get a pattern pretty quickly that they're not really ready to do what they say they want to do. So it's not going to be productive from either side. And in those situations, we say, why don't you call me back when you're ready?
Great. Now, one of the things that I encounter regularly is this mindset of we'll figure it out later. So much so that I've developed a speech that I give to people on the we'll figure it out later mindset. How are you helping a firm get out of that mindset and move forward?
We share with them some examples. We'll do it later. Well, what happens if you don't wake up tomorrow? And I don't mean to be blunt, but I have had 3 different client situations in the last few years where either the founding partner or somebody very senior unfortunately didn't wake up. And in each case, they really didn't have a plan within the firm.
Yeah. So
you ask the question, we'll figure it out later. Ed, what if there is no later?
Well, and I mean, it's a valid question. And I think it leads to, I've had people actually say, well, that's not my problem then, but that's kind of that's a pretty self-centered comment right there. Right. And so that may go back to the mindset discussion as much as anything else. Have you encountered, have you encountered resistance from senior partners where the second generation, as it were, is really looking to do this succession planning, but the senior partner takes the position that they're going to live forever and why bother to do this?
Absolutely. It's unfortunate because we all know we have a sell by date, as it were. None of us are going to live forever unless you have a secret sauce that I'm unaware of. Being realistic, being practical, we should recognize that. Now, there are some individuals who feel if I don't talk about it, it won't happen.
Right.
Okay, and Santa Claus will be here on the 25th, et cetera, et cetera. So sometimes we have to virtually slap them in the face, such as, well, what type of legacy would you like to leave?
Right.
When you're not here, let's play a game. Let's pretend you only live to 100. The following year, what do you want your legacy to be? What position do you want to leave your family in? How do you want people to talk about you? And I'm not trying to guilt anybody into anything. I'm trying to help them shift. If they think they're going to live forever, then maybe they're smarter than I am. But if they recognize they're not, let's take control. Let's future-proof your organization where you're in control of the outcome. You've viewed the options. You've taken care of your family, your legacy, your next generation in the firm as you want it.
Yeah. I think it also goes to this idea of being able to give up the position as a lawyer, which many, many lawyers are unable to do. In that second act that we talked about on Tom's podcast there. So great stuff. All right. So now I want to talk about one thing that relates to law firm marketing, because obviously you're a professional services firm. Law firms are professional services firm. You have a really interesting approach to marketing your services, and you call it the level 1 meetings and relationships. So Talk to me about that.
Okay, it's something that I developed a number of years ago, and I have to give Ward Weedman, who's unfortunately passed on, credit for the original concept. You and I are going to meet hundreds or thousands of people in our career. You can't constantly communicate and try to do business with everybody. So this is as close to an objective assessment tool as I've been able to come across. So you and I meet. We start to develop a potential professional relationship. The level 1 model is a simple Excel spreadsheet, takes about 90 seconds to fill out. We look at each other and each of us assess, will we be an advocate for each other? Will we make each other available? Do we have chemistry? Are we willing to make an explicit commitment to communicate with each other on a regular basis? And regular is subject to what we define it as. Do we interact with the same type of people? Do we work in the same markets? Do we hold the same status with decision makers? Do we understand each other's value add to the marketplace, to the customers? And do we have the same ethics? And we rate each of these on a 1 to 10 scale. In the spreadsheet, it'll self-select. The vast majority of people are level 3s. Nice to know you. Reality is you're never going to call me. I'm never going to call you. Somewhere between 1 and 10% are level 2s. There's potential if we choose to work on it together and develop that next level of relationship, which is a level 1. Level 1 is a fraction of 1% in our database. Those people who we know, like, and trust, and choose to be top of mind anytime a situation comes up. So the level 1 meetings are monthly meetings with one specialty each across a wide spectrum of professionals, where we build strong, deep relationships, and we look for opportunities to collaborate with each other to give more value to the client. 1 + 1 is 3.
So there's a couple takeaways that I want to emphasize out of what you just said there, right? So in the typical referral relationship for a law firm, or a lawyer, really, what you end up doing is you want to have regular face-to-face meetings, typically like once a quarter at a minimum. But because you're doing one-on-ones, right, you're having multiple meetings over that quarter. And what you've done is really consolidate all those. So you're kind of a network creator, if you will, because you've introduced a bunch of people together that would have all been part of your network, but now they have an interrelated network. And so that actually has strengthened the value of the network you created, if network theory is correct, that you've strengthened the overall value. And so you've cut time, you've strengthened value, and then you do it on a regular basis, right? So everybody is seeing each other on a regular basis. So crucially important to the structure that you put in place. And so, by the way, I just want to say, I know that you love spreadsheets because most of your solutions have a spreadsheet involved in them.
Yes, my wife says I have a spreadsheet for everything.
Good. Well, so I guess from the level 1 standpoint, those meetings how are you conducting them? Are you heading them? Is it a group event? Tell me what they look like.
We really try to make them very flexible and simple. We alternate between virtual on odd months and in-person on even months. We set them up. I usually will facilitate the overall meeting, but each member has an opportunity during the year to present a case study so everybody can get even a little bit deeper on, okay, here was a client situation, here was their problem, here's what we did, this is what worked, this is what didn't work. And we'll throw out typically a challenge of the month to get people to think a little bit deeper. So we're in conversations. And so the groups that I've put together, and I'm happy to let them spin off on their own if someone else wants to take the challenge and the burden of facilitating. But the idea is, again, to create added value for everyone. And since we put the groups together, every single person in the group, every member, has gotten more business from this relationship group, this deep relationship group, than any other source.
Oh, that's fantastic. Really fantastic. So keep that in mind for the attorneys listening. Really, this is a way to accomplish this. I have a group, we call it the Entrepreneur Attorneys Group, and we get together. And we don't do it nearly as structured as your group, but there is business flowing back and forth, and it really is helpful. Okay, so Daniel, for listeners who want to know more about your approach, where can they get in touch with you, and where can they get the book on succession planning systems, the 30 secrets to leadership development?
Well, thank you for that softball, Ed. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. Is the easiest place to get this and any of our other books, because this is the fourth in the series. You can always go to our website, which is builditbackwards.com. You can always send me an email, literally my name, Daniel Feiman, at builditbackwards.com. Or you can get a hold of us. Literally, you can call my phone directly, 818-522-2892. And yes, I'm on the West Coast. So for those of you that are early risers in the East, I usually don't answer my phone at 5 o'clock in the morning my time, because it's 8 o'clock your time.
And just so everybody knows, Feiman is Feiman, right? So not the physicist. There you go.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good, great talking to you, Daniel. I look forward to talking to you again.
I look forward to it. Thanks very much for this opportunity.